Good evening, and thank you so much for investing your time with us this Tuesday evening. Yes, you're here at the right place. We're happy for you to take part. Guess what? In our 9th series of Dinner with Practice Heroes, Know Your Numbers, Reporting 101. Your cameras and microphones are turned off purposely. You can enter your questions and comments into the chat box below. And hi again, everyone. My name is Maria Fuertes, and I am the director of the Practice Heroes at CareStack. We're happy for you to take part in our 9th series, once again, of Dinner with the Practice Heroes, Knowing Your Numbers, Reporting 101. On the panel, we have a special guest joining us tonight. We have Wendy Thompson, the Business and Operations Manager of Smile Rehab Centers in Texas. And our Practice Heroes, we got Jackie Lauterbach and Nicole McVicker. Our panelists are passionate about numbers, why it's important to know them when running your practice, running your business. And they will be sharing their tips and wisdom with you tonight on how to do it right. So our goal tonight, folks, is that you will come away with an understanding, knowledge, and pearls of wisdom, if you will, that you can apply to be more successful in your business. So here's a format to give you an idea of what to expect tonight. We'll take a few moments for each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves and tell a little bit about their background in the industry. And we'll have Jackie kick off the conversation by highlighting today's topics. And throughout tonight's webinar, feel free to ask your questions or type in your questions in the chat box below. We want to keep it interactive. And if we don't get to it right away, we'll have more Q&A towards the end. And don't forget, stick with us to the end to get the code for your $25 Grubhub, because guess what? Once again, dinner is on us. Sounds good? Awesome. Let's get started with the introductions. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers, Wendy Thompson, Nicole McVicker, and Jackie Lauterbach.
Thank you, Maria. As Maria said earlier, my name is Wendy Thompson. I am coming to you from Smile Rehab Centers in Southlake, Texas. I started my career in dentistry over 30 years ago. I started in the back as a clinician. I was a dental assistant. I worked general, perio, and ortho. And then some 25 years ago, I moved to the front office and was interested in learning more. And then from there into practice management, where I got introduced to numbers and not having an understanding of it. So it has really piqued my interest, and that's what got me on my journey. I now consult as well as train, and I have worked in operations. I've done DSO, I've done specialty, and I've done private practice. So in all those areas, I was able to glean a lot about numbers, and hope that I get to share some nuggets with you tonight.
Very glad to have you tonight, Wendy. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nicole McVicker. I'm with CareStack. I'm the manager of the Practice Heroes Coaching Division. I've been in the dental industry now for 14 years. I started off when I was in high school for the dental assisting program, and I did dental assisting for a few years. Then I went back to college and got my degree in biomedical science. And from there, I learned a lot about numbers and analytics. And after I graduated, I found myself back into the dental field and kind of just on the software side of things this time. So I'm really excited to tie those two things in together and review these numbers with you guys tonight.
Great, thanks, Nicole. Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie Lauterbach. I'm also here with CareStack. I'm the senior practice hero with the group. I've been in the dental industry for about 9 years. I originally started off in community health, working on the admin side of things, billing and insurance, moving into private practice and management, and then eventually into operations. So of course, all of those roles are heavily saturated with knowing your numbers. So this is definitely a topic I love talking about and sharing with everyone. So glad to be here tonight. So we're gonna kick things off here with some wise words from Marcus Lemonis. He is an American businessman and star of The Profit, a reality show about saving small businesses. As you can see here, it says, "If you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business." And this quote really resonated with us because it's true for all businesses, large and small, and definitely in the dental space. You must have an understanding of the performance of your practice, and in order to do so, you must be looking at your numbers. So tonight,
I'm
We're
sorry,
going to
Jackie. I just need to say something here because you know what? I mean, numbers is usually not the most favorite of topics, if you will. At the end of the day, you know, it's what's driving your business and knowing the data and knowing the numbers. And we're going to go through it. And I know it could be overwhelming for some, but we're going to try to break it down for you.
Thanks, Maria. No, I think that's a great point to mention. Here are some of the topics we're going to cover, and we are going to go more in depth with each of these. So please don't let this numbers topic intimidate you. We're really going to try to break it down and make this something that you can really dial into and absorb. So tonight we're going to talk about these 4 topics. The first one being understanding reporting, the benefits of knowing your numbers, gathering the right information, and turning information into action. So with that, I'm going to hand this off to Wendy, our guest of honor.
Thank you, Jackie. So let's dig in. Tonight, we're going to be talking about our numbers. So the first topic we're going to talk about is understanding reporting. So in order to understand the numbers that we're pulling through reports and make sure that we understand what's going on, if you're talking to your practice manager or your practice owner or even the accountant, that we're all speaking the same terms. So we're going to look at 7 key terms that help you understand your numbers, especially if you're like me that came from the back into the front and you were in this wonderful world of numbers and the terms you didn't have a grasp on, or people were using them interchangeably. This way you'll know exactly what you're looking at and how to use it. So the first top term that we'll look at tonight is metrics. A metrics is simply a data set that just evaluates one area of your practice. So if you're pulling reports and you're just looking at your new patients or you're looking at your hygiene production, those are metrics. The next term that we want to look at is KPI, because we're here KPI. What is KPI? KPI is key performance indicator. So that is a combination of multiple metrics. And what it does is it gives you an overall view of the practice. And so when you're pulling your reports and you're looking at, say, your production, well, if you're looking at your production, then that can be broken down. You're looking at hygiene production. You're looking at your provider's production. So when you pull each of those little data sets in and you're looking at them all together and getting one clear picture, then you're looking at the KPIs. The next thing we'll look at is benchmark. What does it mean? I hear people talk about benchmark. A benchmark is simply the standard that you measure everything else against. So if you're looking at collections, production, new patient, your labor, you're looking at that number and you see the number and you figured out, okay, so is this good? Is this bad? Whatever you measure that against. If it's the national standard, it could be a regional standard. Say your region, the collections is at 98%. And yours is at 80. Well, you're measuring your 80% to that 98%. You know that now is the benchmark. That is a number that is attainable. That's what's an average number. So that is what a benchmark is. So the next thing that we'll look at is production, because we hear production, collection. Everybody knows that we're supposed to look at production and collection and we make goals, but are we looking at the right information? Are we interpreting that information correctly? So you want to determine when you're looking at the report, like I'm in a specialty practice, we're fee for service. We don't do insurance. So some offices you get the pleasure of doing insurance. So you need to know if you're looking at, when someone's talking about gross production to you, is it based on your UCR fees, or are you looking at your insurance gross production, which means you're looking at the amount that you're expected from the insurance fees, or is it the net? Is it the expected with the subtraction of any adjustments that's coming up? So making sure that you're actually looking at the right numbers when you're making a goal is very key in understanding what you're looking at. The last terms that we're going to look at are profitability and P&L, because we all, if you've been anywhere close to the front, worked in the front, or passed through the front, you hear somebody talk about profitability and P&L. So the profitability of your practice is the ability or the degree in which your practice can turn a profit. And simply just looking at the illustration on the side, you realize a profit is very simple. We all want a profit, so we're going to look at all the revenue, all the income that, all the production, all the income and expenses, and then what's left over. Hopefully, you'll always have a profit, but if you're not looking at your numbers and you're not analyzing things, you could actually end up in the negative, and you don't want that. So the profit and loss of a company is important, and the place where you can see that is the P&L, the profit and loss statement. This is a statement that is generally put together or by the bookkeeper or your accountant. It just depends on each practice who's doing that particular accounting. But that P&L on a monthly basis will tell you everything. It'll tell you what you brought in. It will tell you all of the expenses. You have fixed expenses. Those are things you cannot control, like your rent and maybe loan payments. Those things are set. But for someone working in business management or operations, there's a set of numbers on there that definitely are things that you can control. And those are your variable expenses. So things like your labor, things like your supplies, your lab fees, those are things that you can control within the office, that if you're having a month where, like when we came out of COVID and the numbers were down, these are areas that you can, if you're looking at, you can make a difference in that profitability. So Maria, I know that over the years, this is something that's near and dear to you, and you spend a lot of time on profit loss and P&Ls. So.
Right. You know, Wendy, you're so right about a lot of things with respect to what you've described with why you need to, to review your P&L statements. In my experience, it's important to review P&L statements or profit and loss statements on a monthly basis, as well as quarterly and yearly. This is something I've actually implemented with my managers in several of the organizations I worked in. Reviewing your P&L statements on a regular cadence, you'll find that you're able to make wiser, informed financial decisions, because now, guess what? You're armed with concrete knowledge, of how your business is doing, how your practice is doing in terms of revenue and expenses. You're not making these decisions on, like, guess what? Dangerous guesswork. Mm-hmm. And if you're in the red, if you're not in the red, that's where we want to be, right? Not in the red. You'll be able to invest money back to your practice.
Yes, thanks, Maria. One of the things I didn't mention with the P&L, a lot of times our business operations or our operations managers may not see that P&L because it does have a lot of other information on it. But if you're in a position where you're not seeing that P&L, those variable expenses and things like that, you want to get with your practice manager, your practice owner, and see if you can get that particular information, because it will make a difference in what you're doing. So now we're going to look at, now that we know the terms, we're going to look at the benefits of knowing your numbers. One of the things I like to do when I go in and I'm working with a team, I like to first get an understanding of, why are you in business? Does everybody know why this practice is in business? And generally, hopefully, it is to serve our dental community. We all are in this because we want to see lives change. We want people to have better experiences, and we want to take care of our community. And in order to do that, you've got to have a business that is operating and it's functional and turning a profit so that we can meet those needs. So just understanding that this is why we're in business, to take care of our community and to establish and operate a profitable business. So we're going to kind of look at the method that I use when I go in. And one of the reasons that it's so important to establish and look at whether it's the M4 method or other ways of analyzing and looking at your information is, I went into a practice and I was so excited, and everybody knew what the goal was, and this is what we're going to hit. And the staff was excited. They're like, well, we'll get a bonus if we hit this, and we'll take care of this many people because we're getting new patients in. And at the end of the day, I was like, okay, so how did we do? are we going to hit our goals or we're not? What's going on? And they just looked at me and it's like, oh, we don't know. We have a goal at the beginning of the month. The doctor tells us the goal. And then at the end of the month, we know whether we made the goal and we're going to get the bonus or not. So, oh, okay. So let's back. And let's just kind of see how, as a team, we can make sure that we meet these goals. And so basically, if you look at the screen, I developed the M4 method. So it's basically just mapping 4 things. And we want to make sure that, number one, that we are setting goals. So the first M1, we are making a plan. In making that plan, we're setting goals. So if it's your production, your labor, your new patients, everybody has to have a target to hit. And if we know what that target is, we know where we're going. So M2, monitor your progress. So how do we do that? We made a plan. We know where we're going. It's kind of like your GPS. We're set out. So I'm going to pull reports. I'm going to look at spreadsheets, however you're collecting this information, and analyze it to see, are we where we need to be? Like I said, you can pull reports. Most practice management software have a ton of reports. So there's reports there. Some people are keeping things like referrals on a spreadsheet. If that's what you're doing, pull that information in. If you're using a third party to track new patient calls or referrals or different things like that, pull that information in. We're going to pull out all the information we need to look and analyze our goals. Once we've got that information, the M3, you're going to make adjustments. So it's just like I tell everyone, it's just like you're on vacation. I decided I'm going from Texas to California. That's my goal. I'm going to get there. I know how to get there. But along the way, I got rerouted. Something came up on the path and my GPS automatically rerouted me to make sure that I could make the adjustments to get to my goal. Same thing with M4. Now let's make some adjustments. I pull the reports. Are we on track? If we keep on going the way we're going, are we going to hit that goal? Are we above goal? Are we below goal? So that we can make the adjustments. If we're above goal, that's a great thing. And we want to look and see what caused us to be above goal and duplicate that so that we can continue to be on goal. But if we fell a little short, why did we fall short? How did we fall short? What can we do to correct this and make those changes? So the last part of M4 is basically meeting your goals. So if you make your plans, you pull the reports, you're evaluating, you make your adjustments, you are going to hit your goal. And the importance of doing all of this, we're seeing it pretty much in real time. So we're able to go ahead and make the adjustments. So the team that I was working with, they knew every day where they were and where they can make changes and not wait to see at the end of the month if it was going to be a surprise bonus or we're going to surprise meet all of our numbers. They actually had a plan.
Wendy, that's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that. I really love your M4 method. I think it's just visually really sets the map, like you said, for how we're going to reach those goals. I think there's an old adage out there, you can't manage what you can't measure. So it's really important.
Right.
You set that goal. Now we have to figure how we're going to get there and how we're going to monitor our success. And also how are we going to, address if we have a shortcoming too. So
Absolutely.
on this slide that you're seeing now, in the same line of benefits of knowing your numbers, this is to what Wendy was speaking about is now we have to kind of monitor how we're doing, whether we're being successful, whether we're falling behind, regardless of where we're at on our journey of hopefully reaching our goals. We need to be able to track those numbers. And there's many ways to do that. Some people use spreadsheets. Some people have third-party reporting software. Some people, hopefully have that reporting built into their software. But being able to track those numbers and what it is we're looking at in that tracking really helps give us a lot of information when we're looking at those numbers. So some things you can look at here are, for an example, your daily and monthly tracking. You want to stay informed every day. This is something that as leaders in your practice, whether you're the office manager, you are a front desk person who's invested, and you're looking at these things because you know you're contributing to reaching these goals. Even the providers, really any role within the practice can definitely have their eyes on this information and really get a grasp on a daily and monthly basis how you're doing. You also want to assess your progress against your goal. So, as we've already said, you can't manage what you can't measure. So, you need to be comparing back to something, and that's going to be your goal that you've set. You can also compare performance year over year or month over month. This is definitely going to be something that allows you to measure growth. So, this is another facet of knowing your numbers, is not just knowing where you're at, but knowing how you're doing compared to another period of time. You also have an opportunity to evaluate your gross versus net. And I know we covered that a little bit in the first topic and kind of understanding that knowledge base of terminology. But really being able to evaluate gross versus net. And some examples there are showing, true revenue expectations, keeping in mind adjusted gross revenue being different in different softwares. Also, you have that element of understanding. But you can also use this to assess perhaps your effectivity with insurance or membership plans. You're looking at what your gross UCR number is compared to your net, which is after all of your adjustments, whether that's an insurance contractual adjustment or maybe a senior discount or professional discount, being able to see that kind of information. And then lastly, this last bullet here is forecasting your numbers. This is something that's going to allow you to be really proactive when you see opportunities with the numbers that are coming out of your software or your third party or something you're manually pulling. But also it allows you in a reactive sense to strategize. If you're looking at a forecast of your numbers and you're seeing that based on what's booked out in your schedule, let's say we're looking at production, for example, and you're seeing that your scheduled production through the end of the month is coming in below goal. If you weren't looking at this, if you weren't forecasting your number, you wouldn't know until it's too late. So if you're looking at these ahead of time, you really have an opportunity to say, hey, whoa, we need to do something here. We're not going to reach our goal. Where can we strategize? So this is definitely falling in line with that benefit, truly the benefit you're going to gain from knowing your numbers on a daily basis and at the very least on a monthly basis.
And it's like what Wendy actually had referred to it as being your GPS, if you will.
Yeah.
The compass, right? Kind of gauging as to where you're at, in your goals, and are you going to be hitting it, the metrics, are you in the right path or the right road, if you will, and if you need to make a right turn or left turn.
Yeah.
Right. So
Right.
I like that analogy. Thanks for bringing that up. Sorry, just one more thing to add. I think that was great because, as Wendy said, you're on your trip to California and all of a sudden you get rerouted by your GPS. You have to make adjustments like that sometimes. You have to be able to pivot when you need to.
That's absolutely right. And one of the things that we, really recommend in terms of those forecasting those numbers and identifying those different metrics, whatever software that you're in, regardless of that's CareStack or other softwares, you have those tools at your fingertips. So you need to utilize them. So this is just an example of some of the KPIs that we currently use to evaluate benchmarks and identify gaps in workflow. So the intent is to improve the overall health of your practice. And this is one of the examples. These tiles are from the dashboard that we have for analytics. And as you can see in this first one here, the insurance collection rate is looking pretty low. So this tells us that there's something that we need to look at. There's something that we need to identify. So then we can start pulling in some different KPIs just to kind of see where are we at. So if we go to the next one and we see insurance receipt transfers, we can kind of identify that this number is starting to go up, that we're actually starting to move our insurance money into patient credits. So that's something that you would use in a real life scenario to identify if we needed to change something in workflow, if we had gaps in workflow, possibly present some training opportunities that we want to set aside for the team, maybe give them some additional training. And then of course, in the last one here, you can see the claims rejected is sitting at about 12,000. So that can definitely contribute to a low insurance collection rate. So we want to identify and work through that AR, make sure that we are working as hard as we can to recoup that money in a timely manner. And from one of our reports that we have available here, you can see completed services with pending claim creation. This identifies for us that we have 123 codes currently that have not been billed or sent to the insurance yet. So these are missed opportunities for us to collect that money from the insurance because the insurance has not even received it yet. So these are some of the examples that you can pull to identify if we've got those low rates, what can we do to improve the overall health of our practice? The information is at your fingertips, but you just have to ask yourself, are you actually utilizing it?
You know, this is actually one of my favorite slides, excuse me, if you will, Nicole, because we can talk about production all we want, but if we're not going to collect, once again, you know, it's important, right? And I think people forget to take a look at their completed services with pending claims. Throughout my experience, I've seen a lot of that happen, as well as transferring to the patient portion after you've received an insurance payment. You know, that's like not right. Excuse me.
That's absolutely right, Maria. And like we said, you know, regardless of what software you're using, they have dashboards, scorecards, reports. So just identifying what those things that you need to look for your team is the first step to success.
Yes, it is, Nicole. I really like that dashboard because you can see several metrics in one place. And to me, that helps with not being overwhelmed. You're not having to pull a lot of reports.
Absolutely.
So now that we've talked about the benefits of your knowing your numbers, and we've looked at reporting, we want to make sure that we're gathering the right information, because like I said, I've done so many different practice management software, and there's always tons and tons of reporting in there. And if you know you're kind of like me and you're a report junkie, you can dive into them and you can spend days and days looking at numbers a lot of different ways, and it can become overwhelming. So we want to make sure that the reports that we're pulling do have the information that we need. We're going to look at reports for production, collection, adjustments, and if you notice on the right, there's a ton of reports. So it's 12. And we're just going to kind of look at the different reports and how we use them so that we're not overwhelmed.
I'm sorry, can I also add that, you know, anytime that any of the attendees, you want to take a screenshot of it, please feel free to do so, okay? We're here to share our tips and wisdom with you throughout the evening.
Totally. So with these 12 reports on the side, I mean, some of them you may recognize, some of them you may not. They may be called different names, but on a daily basis, when I'm looking at my production, I look for a daily journal, something that's going to have multiple metrics in it. So I'm going to be able to see what took place that day. I look at my transactions and my incompleted procedures. So it may be something different in CareStack. I mean, you have a chance to look at incomplete and missing transactions. So looking at those things will give me exactly the idea of what happened on a daily basis. When I look at collections, I'm looking at my transactions for that day. On a monthly basis, I do look at my gross production, my net production. I look at all of my adjustments. I look at especially with my adjustments, I'm looking at what we did for the month as far as discounting. We're a specialty, so we do offer like a cash discount. How much are we discounting? How much were my third-party financial fees that we're paying, so that we can analyze that and see if we need to make any changes in companies, anything like that. But we look at that on a monthly basis because I'm preparing for the next month. I'm not looking at it on a monthly basis to see really where we end up, because as I have monitored and made adjustments throughout the month, each day, each week, I already know where we are. I'm looking at that information so that I can prepare for the next month. On the next slide, there's a couple of examples. And like I was saying with Nicole, I like to look at things that I can see a lot of stuff at one time, so that I'm not spending half a day pulling a collection report, pulling a production report, pulling this report. The first example, I am a current CareStack user. I've used multiple other platforms. And I love the fact that I can set up scorecards. I have scorecards set up on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis. And that way, with a quick glance, I can see what my numbers are this happens to be a week. And so I can see my gross, I can see my gross production, I can see collections, I can see what our average production per day was, and I can see how many patients that was across. So I can get the right information in little effort. So like I said, I'm spending my time wisely. I'm still able to manage the practice. I'm able to see my patients and talk to people, but I'm able to grab this information and answer questions and make my plans. The second example, I couldn't remember, I've been at this for so long, is either Dentrix or Open Office, but the same concept. It's a monthly production and income report. So it's one report that's pulling in two different sets of information. It's broken down by the day. So this is another example of a report that you can pull so that you're gathering multiple types of information in one report. Because we know in operations, so many things can happen during the day, and you may not have a lot of time just to sit and run reports and look at them. So to me, this is very key in gathering the right information, is getting it all in one or two reports.
That's right, Wendy. It's all about the work smarter, not harder, right?
Yes.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. So on this next slide here, we're looking at the income allocation report, which is showing all your detailed production numbers, your collection numbers, beginning and ending balances, and of course your totals for the date span selected.
This is one of my favorite reports.
I know. Maria, why don't you talk to this one? Because I know we all love this one.
No, I don't know. You guys can do it, but I can talk about this for days, but go ahead. Don't want to bore everybody.
This report, fun fact, is one of the most used reports to date in CareStack. Users are commonly using this for accounting and for payroll purposes. But this is a great report showing you many numbers on a daily basis. And this kind of lends to Wendy's point that we all have a lot to do every day. We really want to maximize our time, maximize our efforts. So when you have the opportunity to have a singular report that's giving you many different points of data that you need on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, whatever it may be, those would be the reports that I would gravitate to. So Nicole, I know you've got some insight on this one, so I'd love to hear your points.
Yeah, absolutely. I highly recommend running this report. Like we kind of touched on, just being able to follow through. And in this view, you can see that this has the grand total, and it actually does have provider breakdowns. And that's one of the main reasons why I highly recommend it, is because each individual provider can even see their individual breakdown. So it really helps make sure that they're getting the procedures allocated correctly, that they're completing. So all the services that they've rendered will go into this production, into this gross production number here. And then any adjustments that are done on top of that trickle into that net production amount. So again, if you are fee for service and you're utilizing UCR fees, the gross number in your UCR will typically match, but this just gives you at a glance, just quickly, everything that's going against that provider. So for example, in this date range here, we can see that it's pulling the first few months of the year. So it just gives us an idea of what our grand totals are looking like. And the provider can see if there's any adjustments. Everything that's at the individual provider level is clickable. So they can get a drill in of all of those services that are rendered to them and any adjustments as mentioned. Now, on the second piece of that, where we look into a little bit of those collection pieces, this really helps for payroll purposes, especially when you're paying on collection, because it really helps make sure that nobody's getting overpaid on services that were not rendered to them. So it also includes advance payments, so you can kind of track anything that's tagged to a provider that's supposed to be intended for future services. So if that number starts to get really high, you can kind of say, okay, we need to get these people in, or, when are we going to get these completed kind of situation. And then of course, any payments that get allocated towards those procedures, you can use those numbers. And if there is any collection adjustments that should be considered, down to that net applied payment number, which is what we typically would recommend. And then this report will also, in drilling down into those numbers and really identifying what is getting allocated towards those payments, will help you track your credit balances. So you're not leaving patients with a bunch of payments that are not being tied to the correct services.
Nicole, these are all really great points. I think
Right.
we're hearing a lot of common terms here: production, collections, allocating. All
Yep.
of these are numbers that everyone should be familiar with and looking at. But what you're really bringing this full circle message back to is, are these numbers accurate? Which is this piece of gathering the right information, not only the best reports to use, but are the numbers accurate? And you don't know that until you're kind of looking a little deeper. So thank you for kind of explaining this report. I know we're all a little CareStack biased, but every software out there is going to give you some version of this information. The importance is that, are you looking at the right information and are you checking it for accuracy?
I think it's
Exactly,
also,
Jackie.
yeah, it's also one thing important to bring home, like what Nicole had mentioned, is about credit balances, right? So I love the fact that it can discern whether, it is an advanced payment, like Nicole states, so that when you're running that credit balance report, if you will, you're able to, see the delineation. What is really truly a patient credit, and is it really a patient credit because of advanced payment? Because maybe they're having, perio procedures like in Wendy's, right? In Wendy's practice, or, ortho or what have you. So, like I said, again, it's one of my favorite reports. It basically just breaks it down for me, easy to read. And a lot of the providers that I worked with in the past, really enjoyed looking at this report. It was their GPS, if you will.
Yes. And Maria, one of the things too about the credit balance report, or it's just seeing, like you said, if it's a true credit. I've been in practices where I had doctors say, well, hey, it's a credit. Let's not, let's just leave it alone. But each state has laws on how you have
Right.
to report that credit balance. So you definitely want to make sure that you are on top of it, because if it's not going back to the patient and it's a true credit balance, it may need to be turned over to the state. That's another reason that you definitely want to dig into those credit balances. We don't want them to just
Right.
sit there and look pretty. We want to either allocate them to the work that we're doing, or get those patients in, or turn it over if we need to.
Very
I'm
good.
biting at the bit because I was working in an organization. We almost had a 1 million in credit balances, if you will. Yes. And I had actually had to hire somebody to go through an audit. It took a year and a half. And we every quarter we were able to discern, what we were to escheat to the state. So yes, you get to know
Yes.
your local laws, if you will, with respect to credit balances. Got to make sure that you're on top of that.
Definitely. The next thing that we're going to look at is, we talked about production, collection, now the credit balances, and all of that is awesome and we need it. But we want to look at some numbers that you definitely want to be on top of and that you're collecting, because without new patients, a practice does not grow. Without new patients, there's no production, there is no collections. So we definitely want to be able to track that information. So when a new patient come in, you really want to know where they came from. So you're going to look at your referrals as well as your new patients, because there's a lot of information there. It can tell you how your front is doing. Do we need to do some additional training? Are the patients calling and we're not getting them in the doors because we're lacking at the on the phone? How many times are they calling? What does it take to get a patient in? And what doctors are sending us referrals? Because we definitely want to reach out to those doctors and strengthen those bonds. If it wasn't a doctor, was it Google? Was it Facebook? How are these patients coming in? And just knowing that if I've got a lot of patients coming in through my Google ad, I may want to put some more money into that Google ad, and I may want to move that money away from, say, a Facebook ad. So again, these are ways of getting that number, and it's not just about the new patient or referral, but now you're circling back to that P&L and those variable things that we can move around. And this is an example how, if you just look at it, you're thinking, oh, new patients, but you've got to be able to look at the broader picture. And here we go again. This is actually a CareStack example, and I love it because you can track so much on it. So Nicole, will you walk us through the setup and the reporting that we can get, or we should be looking for when we're tracking our new patients?
Absolutely. Wendy, I love what you said too about, just without new patients, we don't have new production, right? So that really does kind of tie back into the referrals as a really important source of generation of new patients, right?
Mhm.
So as you can see here in the screenshot that we have, this is exactly what it looks like if you go in to add a new patient into your software. So you'll notice in the drop-down area, we have a referral source and a referral subcategory. So in this case, you can see that you can pull from your actual patient database, which is really nice because you already have that information entered in the system, right? So let's just say you have your patient that comes in and says, hey, I sent somebody a referral, or that patient that comes in says, Jackie referred me. Then you can actually go in and choose that patient, and it's going to populate your patient database for you. So it allows you to just seamlessly add that. And when you run your reports, you'll be able to identify exactly who was. And if you wanted to give them an incentive, maybe like a little $25 gift card or something like that. As we know, a referral is the greatest gift a patient can give to us, right? And like Wendy said, not only just for patients, but strengthening those bonds with external providers, or maybe your internal providers are bringing people in, your staff, maybe somebody drove by. Those are all things that you can enter in. And then the report that we have is called the refer in report. So anything that you enter into this screen gets automatically counted as part of your refer in report. So you can actually see and kind of dial into where those people are coming from. And then you can actually see a high level overview of where most of your referrals are coming from. Is it because they drove by? Is it because they're using ZocDoc in your area or something along those lines? So Maria, I know you have a lot of experience with referral sources and marketing efforts. If you want to go ahead and elaborate on that for us.
Yeah, I'll just do a brief high overview, if you will, do for time. But I got to tell you, it's like what Nicole and Wendy had stated, run these reports. You got to figure out what's actually working for you. It's that return on investment, that ROI, right? So Wendy states, let's say I'm putting a lot of money into Facebook ads or Instagram ads, but it's not giving me anything in return, because, you're making sure that your front desk team members are actually, recognizing how did the patients hear about us, right? So it's important to keep track and know where to put your monies towards once you get that P&L, and saying, like, you know what, that those Facebook ads and Instagram ads, it ain't working. Let's do the Google.
Great point.
Yep.
So the next slide, what we're looking at here is we've gathered the right information and we looked at it in different areas, but we're going to circle back around to the P&L and variable expenses, because we kind of touched on it a little bit here and there, but we want to make sure that, like I said, we're looking at it and we're understanding. So on the right, this is an example of a profit and loss statement for practice. As you can see, we can see our income, we can see the collections, and then we have a long list of expenses. Again, like I said before, there's certain expenses as an operations manager, business manager, so you won't have control over, and you may not see this whole P&L, because the only information that you need is those variable expenses. So you're going to want to, again, get with your practice owner and see if you can get that piece out, because when you're looking at those variable expenses, you want to be able to see, number one, what have you been spending in those areas? Do you have an idea what your supply budget it should be, or are we just ordering things because we need them? In a situation where you're now gathering the information, you're analyzing it, and your GPS is telling you, hey, it's time to reroute, because at the rate we're going, we are not going to make our goal. What can I do, even though we may not have made our production goal? If we didn't make the production goal, you're definitely not going to make generally the collection goal, because it's a percentage. What can I do to make sure that my office is still going to be profitable? And it all lies within the variables. I can go back and say, okay, guys, hey, we wanted to buy a piece of equipment. Let's put that off. Or where are we at on our supplies? Do we actually need all of this stuff, or we're just buying in bulk? Can we get through by ordering certain things? And so it gives you a chance to stop and analyze what you have actually been spending, where you are for the month, and make those adjustments before the end of the month so that we're always profitable and that we're always going to be here to take care of the community, to take care of our staff. But this is definitely an area that you want to be looking at the numbers in.
All right, so we're now in our final section here, turning information into action. So now that we've reviewed the benefits of knowing our numbers and which reports are best to gather the right information, I know we've covered a lot of detail. Now we can talk about how we can turn this newfound information into actual action steps. So this image that you're seeing here is from the CareStack dashboard. Not everyone who's on CareStack might be seeing this. This is kind of a new release of information, but you can definitely see this in many platforms.
Coming down the pipeline.
Yes, coming down the pipeline. Coming down soon. This is just one example of how your practice management software can help you be informed. So, again, we're trying to drive it back to what kind of information, what kind of numbers can we pull out of our software so that we can really run our practice. You can see a lot of information here about your schedule and about your performance on the screen. So some things that you can glean from a view like this or reporting that gives you similar information, you can evaluate areas for improvement. So in this sense, you can see your production gauges on the left and how they're comparing to goal. Again, we're driving back kind of to that M4 method. We want to identify our goal and see how we're reaching that. These numbers can really identify areas that we want to focus on and grow from. These are things that I'd look at when I'm looking at individual or team accountability. If we're not reaching those goals, do we have, certain people that might need to step it up a little bit more? Do we have a whole team that maybe needs to perform better or more cohesively? And of course, we want to look at these areas for success too. It's not all about where we're falling short. These can also give us some indicators of how we're doing a really great job, and maybe we can duplicate that. Maybe we can keep maximizing on that opportunity. This also shows us a lot about our practice relative to your operations. So it's not always exactly numbers that we're measuring, but it's still very informative to help you when you're reaching your goals and how is that affecting your numbers. So another excellent way to apply your numbers into everyday action is having a team huddle. I know this is one of our all favorite topics. So I'm going to hand this back to Wendy to kick it off and talk about huddles.
Yes, huddles, huddles, huddles. How I love huddles. I gave the example about the office that I went in that wasn't really monitoring where they were going with their goals until the end of the month. One of the interesting things about that team is they had huddles. And it surprised me that they had a huddle but they didn't know where they were going. So the huddle was basically the morning gripe session. So it wasn't very productive. I'm giving an example of a office that I went in, and they were pretty excited, but they weren't having any huddles. The operations manager was like, well, we kind of know what we're doing. We talk about the goals. Everybody know what the goals is. And then, throughout the day, we'll talk about it. And I was like, so we really need to have a huddle. In my practice, we have 2 huddles. We love them so much. We have an end of the day huddle where the business team, we look at the day, how we ended, we look at our goals, and as a team, we decide, hey, this is where we think we may have did great at, this is where we may have fallen short, this is the new number for tomorrow. We need to explain to the team that that production number that we had has now changed because we didn't make it, or we did make it and we're ahead. So we want to be able to, as a management team, discuss that before we end the huddle in the morning with the whole team. And it allows us, when we go into that morning huddle, again, like I said, now we are preparing the team with, this is what our goal is for today. Hey, what do you think are some takeaways? And we get them involved because this is a team thing. So rather than us give them the takeaways, they tell us what they feel could have changed or what they feel made a big difference. So they get accountability there. And then even with that, our assistants prepare, they go through the schedule. They tell us about the patients that are coming in. Are there opportunities for those patients to do same day treatment? If we have new patients, where in the schedule can we put these patients? They kind of direct us on that. So they have an involvement, a buy-in. It's not like, oh, production. The front just want us to produce and they just threw some more patients in here. They take that ownership to tell us, hey, this is a great spot. This is a great spot. So if we fill these and we do this, we're gonna make our goal for the day. Or
Right.
they'll say, hey, recare, I've got this patient that never came in for their restorative work. So we can't see them today, but let's try to get them in. So the whole team is involved in knowing what these numbers are, where we're going with it, and they're participating in making the adjustments. So
Right.
that really
Wendy,
makes a difference.
yeah, Wendy, to your point, it's part of the GPS again, right? It's
Is.
also about the team knows the pulse of the practice. But I got to tell you, the daily huddle, whether it's held in the morning or the end of the day, this is an undervalued form of communication.
Yes.
It brings everybody in, right? It's the most effective meeting with your team, and it's not to be confused as a monthly team meeting. So
Right.
I just know how it's been in successful in many ways.
Exactly. The huddle is such an essential piece of the business, and just kind of reviewing everything together, making sure that you're setting realistic goals for your practice and for your individual providers. And one way that you can really optimize your huddles is by actually reviewing those goals with providers and making any adjustments for daily provider goals if you're not meeting them or exceeding the set goals at the beginning of the month. So you may need to pivot your work schedules to increase production. You might have to, maybe you're doing certain specialties on one day a week. Maybe you want to change that to multiple days a week. But again, setting realistic expectations for the goals that you do set, and then striving to beat them and make them so that way you are hitting your goal or exceeding them. That way, and then the next year, you can look at the previous year and see what worked for you and what didn't. So just again, to kind of explain a little bit of that daily adjustment per meeting your monthly goals, this is just one of the ways in CareStack here. You can see that for this specific provider, it plans out exactly what the hours are from the production calendar. So the way that you've set it up in the system for their operatories, the system will actually pull that in, and then you'll be able to set your own goal. So in this case, you can see it's set to 60,000. And then you might need to determine which days on those specialties you might need to go in and edit certain days, instead of I like what Maria always says, you don't want to spread it like peanut butter, right? You might have
Right.
days where you have differences. So to stay on target, you can look at this production per hour and see if that's something that you can meet. And if not, maybe you need to readjust that.
So very important points there, Nicole. Love it. All right.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
We have one question in the chat. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh.
If you might want to back up to that last slide.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
We have one question from someone that says, if you're a new owner, how do you decide what your goal is? And I just want to a little bit elaborate on this question, because there's a new owner of an existing practice, and there can also be a new owner in the sense of like a de novo, a brand new practice that's starting and, opening up brand new doors. So Maria, with your experience, do you have just a little pearl of wisdom on maybe how you'd approach that initial setting of a goal for a provider on a monthly basis, perhaps?
Well, I can't give you a number, but I can tell you this. If you're a de novo, then obviously you've already had created a business plan, right? And that business plan should then, basically dial it down for you with respect to what revenue is. Revenue streams, meaning its production as well as collections. I would definitely then take it aside and ask yourself, this is how you can get a hold of Wendy, Nicole, Jackie, myself.
Screenshot.
We love having you. We love having you. We love having you hanging out with us tonight. And ladies, I love the fact that you're hanging out with me. I'm looking forward to more series with you in the future. I know that numbers is not a fun topic, but it's an important topic. So we want to wish everybody a good night, and thank you so much once again for attending our Dinner with the Practice Heroes. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.